Welcome to the Elokus podcast. This is class number 21 in the discourse Shlach Lecha Anashim, which is the fifth discourse in the great book B'Shasha Ekdimu. We're holding a little chapter 20. This is the fifth class in chapter 20. And we're getting close to the end of the chapter, which will bring us to the end of the fifth discourse. We might even finish it today. Let's see how it goes. Okay. So in last class, we were learning how Torah is the Or Pnimi, Torah is the internal light. As Torah is the internal light, there is, just like the Or Pnimi we were speaking earlier in general, is that it has various different stages. Eventually it completely vests itself in the vessels, but even when it's prior to its investment in the vessels, even when it's still in the source, has already a somewhat of a adjustment, a modification. The light is a little adjusted. But on the other hand, we were learning how when the light is in the source, its definitions are very, very, very unfelt and not rigid. And for that reason, the light is very much canceled in the infinite light, or in the essence. And so we said that in Torah, that level of Torah is the secrets of the Torah, which is called midbar, which is called wilderness. So the Torah itself has we learned the civilized Torah. That's the part of the Torah that we understand. It's completely understand it. And there is the farmland, which is like the intentions of the mitzvot and of the commandments. And then there is a prior level, which is the wilderness of the Torah, which is the secrets of the secrets, the oil of the Torah. And that level of Torah, although there is a pleasure to it, but it's a very silent pleasure. It's a very, we might say, a very benign pleasure, because it's the strongest pleasure, but at the same time so unified with the soul itself that it's not felt. Like the pleasure of life that we gave an example, that we don't feel it because it's so much at the core of who we are. And it's interesting. So we learned that level of pleasure leads us, that level of midbar, that level of Torah, that wilderness level of Torah prompts and leads a person to want to do a mitzvah just because the mitzvah is the mitzvah. Not because of all the reasons that the mitzvah possesses, all the pleasures that there are in the pleasure, all the divine ecstasies that it releases and that we can experience, and the yechudim and the zivugim and the unifications. In other words, the Kabbalist approach to a mitzvah, which is to tune into all the spiritual juices that are flowing in a mitzvah, is not what interests the person who is coming from a much deeper place, higher than the secrets of Torah, coming from the secrets of the secrets. What one is seeking over there is the simple fulfillment of God's will. In other words, at that level, you feel the essence. And the essence of God is pertaining only in the simple act of a mitzvah, just the act itself, not any of the frills of the action. Nothing added to it, just the pure action because God said so. And we said that's the secret of the land of Canaan. The land over here represents the midbar, the land. Whenever he said earlier that whenever it says land, plain, it means the level of wilderness, the level of midbar. And Canaan means the outcome of the land is that it's Canaan. Canaan means hachna'ah. Hachna'ah means complete submission to God's will, which is referring to, so the main objective of going into the land of Israel was to be able to do a mitzvah properly. That means not get distracted by any of the fireworks that the mitzvah produces, but to just stick to the mitzvah itself. What is the mitzvah? And just with simple obedience, do the mitzvah, which is a complete submission of self. But over here, it's coming from the deepest connection, from the deepest experience of the highest dimension of Torah, which leads a person to this level of, as we discussed earlier in Chabad, how much, on the one hand, we explore the deepest and highest levels of Torah. On the other hand, Chabad asks for the simple observance of a mitzvah. That's the amazing, and that's the meaning of going into the land of Israel. So However, he said, V'noida, we'll go back a few lines. The makol makom tzarich li is geluyim gamke. We also need to have revelations, notwithstanding the fact that the act of the mitzvah stems even from the highest level, even higher than the highest level of Torah. Because the highest level of Torah, even that is still a level of revelation. It's a level of, as we discussed in last class, it's the light that is within the source, but it's the light of the source, not the source itself. But the action of a mitzvah, which we do with the material physical world directly, that registers and vibrates into the essence itself. So one would argue then why do we need to study Torah to begin with? Why do we need all those experiences? Why do we need the pleasure, which is already considered an experience outside of the essence? Why not just stick with the essence and just have obedience in Torah and mitzvahs? Why the need for the gilui, for the revelation? So he says, we also need to have experience. We need to have revelation. And the last point we made was that you can see that earth is able to give forth vegetation, but yet to shake up the earth, to give forth its own power, which, as we discussed last time, earth has that power because earth is related to God plants His very essential power into the earth. So the earth represents over here the simple act of a mitzvah. There's the earth, the physical earth that produces fruit, but in terms of our connection to God, it represents the earthy part of our connection, which is the simple action of a mitzvah, which is the most potent and the most powerful. But yet we know that in order for the earth to give forth its produce, it needs rain from heaven. Now, although the heaven doesn't have the power to produce anything, the heaven just gives the water, but the water loosens up the earth to bring forth the power that the earth has on its own, not from the water. But it still needs the water to liquefy it, to give it some ability to be able to unearth its own power. So the same is also our physical bodies doing God's will is the most potent, powerful thing. But in order for us to have that, we need some juice from the soul as well, from the heaven inside of us, including the Torah is called heaven and mitzvahs are called earth. So the Torah has to water the mitzvahs. And that's what we mean over here, that revelation needs to stimulate the mitzvah itself. And we find that in Torah itself, that the mitzvahs are not given to us in a separate book, but they're given to us in the Torah. From the Torah grows out the mitzvah. We also know what the sages tell us, that Talmud, the Torah study is great, Shemei v'lidei ma'aseh leads us to action, which means that it's only through the Torah study that leads us into the action, that we need the action, that the action is watered by the Torah. We need revelations, just like growth. Grows from the earth in its own power. But nevertheless, it says that just like we need to have the rain coming down on the soil to water it so that the soil can give forth its own power. It allows it to give birth, and that it should produce its produce. Just like we said, he says in the parentheses, just like the revelation of the mitzvahs, Torah dafka comes through Torah. And the same is also in order that there should be a revelation of the action of the mitzvah on its own. Nevertheless, we need hamshachas mad. We need to draw forth. Mad stands for Maayon duchrin, masculine waters, which means the heaven, the spiritual forces are called male, and the earth is called female. It's like a couple that exists, a cosmic couple. Earth is the woman, and the heavens is the man. Now, translating that in mitzvahs is the earth part, and the Torah is the male part. That's why women are not obligated and study Torah. It's a masculine element. It has to do with the women are closer to the action of the mitzvah itself. So, yet, even though the woman, meaning the feminine element, the physical body, in terms of body and soul, the soul is the husband, and the body, so it says in the Zohar, and the body is the wife, is the woman. So really, the real power lies in the act of a mitzvah. But yet, there still needs to be juiced up with, just like a woman can't give birth, even though she's the one that has the ability, she ovulates, she has the egg, she has the ability to produce the child, yet she cannot, it's not stimulated, it's not awakened unless there is it needs to get fertilized by the man. That's called hamshachas Maayon duchrin, the drawing of the masculine waters. Tchila. Shazal b'chinas gili, or we need to have some godly revelation. After that can come the erasing of the feminine waters. For example, we spoke how the Baal Shem Tov came and he evoked in the simple people that they should serve God with their simplicity. So these people were simple even before the Baal Shem Tov comes. Why did they need the Baal Shem Tov to evoke their simplicity, to serve God with simplicity? The answer is any awakening requires some tzaddik, some great channel of above, and all he does is just causes a shake. But the shaking, once it's shaking, it's the simple person that has that power, not the Baal Shem Tov. The power is not the Baal Shem Tov. The power is the simple people. But they needed a Baal Shem Tov to awaken that. And the Baal Shem Tov brought Torah. He brought the highest level of Torah, the wilderness part of Torah, which this is what gave an appreciation to the simple service of the simple Jews. But you needed that stimuli from the man. Then you can have the raising of the feminine waters, which means the power that lies in the female herself, the Maisa HaMitzvahs, from the action of the mitzvah, mitzad atzmai, that has the impact and reaches the essence of God from within itself. But first it needs a stirring from the male. And now he connects it to the sending of the spies. The point over here was, once the Jewish people were going to go into the land of Israel, well, the main point of the land of Israel's actions of mitzvahs, and that power is in the earth itself of the land of Israel, the power to produce these mitzvahs. But in order for that power to happen, there needed to be an infusion of masculine lights in other words, the Torah needed to be sent down to the mitzvahs in order to awaken the mitzvahs. So in our case, as it played out, the Jewish people, the spies, they were masculine souls, and their energy, and they needed to go to the land of Israel to shake up the land itself. In other words, they were like the rain. When Moses sent the spies were like raindrops that were needed to go into the land before the land can start its production to produce its ultimate fruit, which is the drawing forth of God's essence through the acts. But in order to moisturize it, these spies were the ones that were sent by Moshe to come and awaken through their masculine light, to awaken the power that's in the earth. This was the whole idea of sending the spies. Laseres Eretz Canaan, to awaken the land of Canaan. Lahamshech, who would have thought that sending these spies have such a potent, powerful objective? Lahamshech, to draw forth B'chinas Hamshachas Mad, the drawing of the masculine waters, the male waters. Maayon duchrin, the male waters. La'oider, to awaken es Allah esman da'aretz. Basically, the earth itself needed a wake-up call. It needed to be put into, needs to be stirred up so that now it can produce its mitzvahs. The ultimate objective, hu asiyah, b'payil mamish, the actual deed of a mitzvah. Shebezeh davka ha'yisroel ha'or. This is where that's where the real added light comes, because that's when you're stimulating not just light, you're stimulating the essence. And that's bringing potency and power like we've never seen before. More than just if you're learning Torah. If you're learning Torah, you're just stirring the light. You're not reaching the essence. But if you're doing a mitzvah, you're touching the essence. But in order for the mitzvah to work, we said you need to bring the lights of Torah down. And that's the idea, Kanis Kaliyel, as we said earlier. And that's the meaning why when he sent the Meraglim, he calls them, when Moshe sends the spies, it calls them Vayasuru es Eretz Canaan. Simply it means they should tour. The word Vayaturu is the word, same word as touring. They should tour the land of Canaan, scout it out. But the deeper meaning is, Vayaturu comes from the same word like Yisroel. Yisroel means to add. To bring a Yisron, to add, to bring an advantage, to create a profit. What's the profit? Vayasuru as Eretz Canaan. They should bring the profit that's in the land of Canaan. What does that mean? The land of Canaan has the ability, once the Jewish people were going into the land of Canaan, they'll be able to draw down and stimulate the highest essence of God. And that's much more than we've had. Moshe says it's way more than we've ever had in the 40 years in the desert. We were bathing in light. We didn't touch the essence. To touch the essence, we need to go into the land of Canaan. That's why Moshe so badly wanted to go into the land of Israel. He didn't want to die, not because he questioned where his soul is going to go. His soul is going to go into places of ecstasy and bliss, but it's all light. It's not the essence. Moshe wants the essence. The essence is only in the action of a mitzvah that will be available mainly on the land of Canaan. Because as we said earlier, Canaan, to be able to do the mitzvah with purely because God said so. And that's when the power, it has all of its potency and it's all its power. But we need the male raindrops to go there to enable this Yaturu, Vayasuru as Eretz Canaan, to make the land profitable. Just like you can't bring out the power of a field, you can't bring out the power of the soil unless you first drop some water on it. So too, the Meraglim, they were coming to bring the water so that you can get the benefit that's in the land itself. V'zeu shenikra Eretz Canaan, and that's why it's called the land of Canaan. The Tachlis HaKavana, the ultimate objective, Huakniya, is the simple submission, B'kiyom HaMitzvahs, the simple surrender in the doing of the mitzvahs, B'poyol Mamish in the literal sense, Dafka, However, in order for this to happen, you need to have first Hamshachas Mad, the drawing of the male waters, which was the intention of the spies. However, now he's going to explain what the mistake of those spies were. How did they fail so badly? They had such an incredible high mission. How did they mess up so terribly? So he's going to explain like this. In order for the Torah to be able to generate the observance of mitzvahs, is only when the Torah itself is studied in the right manner. And we said before, Torah is more revelation. It's more experience. On the lower levels of Torah, it's understanding. Understanding is full of, it's experience. You understand, you know, you grasp. There's a lot of self in it. In a mitzvah, we said the main point is, it's not me, it's God's will, and that's all that it is. It's God, there's no experience. Simple obedience to his will. And only over there can the essence of God reveal itself, in that simple obedience. Torah is experience. Now, in the lower levels of Torah, very strong experience. The part of Torah called, we said earlier, the field. I'm sorry, not the field, the civilized part, the yishuv, the cities of Torah. That's where there's full understanding, full grasping, full understanding, and the pleasure of understanding. So that it has a lot of self in it, a lot of experience of it, self-experience. The higher levels of Torah, the intentions of mitzvot, you feel it's mystical, you feel it's beyond you. There's a little more humility there. The ultimate humility of Torah, we said, is the wilderness of Torah, the secrets of the secrets. Where over there you can't even feel the pleasure, it's beyond pleasure, as we discussed earlier. So here's the thing. When a person studies Torah and you sense very much your own pleasure and your own delight, that doesn't lead you to mitzvahs. That can, God forbid, in a sense, lead you away from mitzvahs. Because you start shunning simple obedience, because we become so spoiled by experience, by delight, by understanding. So to do something diametrically opposed, to do something where you have no experience of self at all, where you don't feel anything, just to do an act of a mitzvah and not fill that act with self, but to fill it just simply with God's will, it's very difficult. Quite on the contrary, people that are cultivated to study Torah in a way that it bolsters their ego have a very hard time appreciating simple people doing simple mitzvah just because God said so. They even look down at it. They look at it as if it's not. It's like, what is that? Just a plain mitzvah? Like they don't understand a lot of times. People that are engrossed in Torah study, precisely those that are very, very knowledgeable Torah, they look at the Chabadnik that's out in the street doing a mitzvah with someone, and they can see that the person has no deeper intention in the mitzvah, just does it and smiles and takes a picture and say, oh, you're shaming the tefillin, or you're doing something like that. You're almost like, it's like, what's its value? They don't appreciate it. That's why I was saying earlier, it's only from the learning of the deepest secrets of Torah that instills that humility to appreciate the simplicity of the simple Jew. It's like, unlike the Lithuanian communities, where the people would wish themselves to be, like when you had great scholars, they wish they could be even a greater scholar. They wish they could be like Rabbi Akiva Eger. They wish they could be like the Vilna Gaon. Like in the Hasidic communities, the greatest scholars and the greatest thinkers and the greatest minds wished that they can do a mitzvah like Beryl the butcher, who had no understanding of anything, and he just simply put on the tefillin because God said so. They would wish for themselves, because it's very hard if you're saturated with experience and with delight. It's very hard to cast that all aside and just do mitzvahs with the simple, just because God said so. And they realized and they felt that when they're doing the mitzvah, because they know all the juice of the mitzvah, they're actually allowing some of that to distract them from just doing the mitzvah with the simplicity of the simple Jew. So that was also the place where the Meraglim, the spies, got caught up. If there was ever a place when people had spiritual indulgence, it was the desert. They studied Torah with Moshe for 40 years. They had such understanding and delight and ecstasy and bliss. Now, the purpose of them going into the land of Canaan was to use that delight and that pleasure to get a little juice and to juice the land. But it must be done with, they themselves needed to sense and appreciate the preciousness of the land. But they did not appreciate that. So when they went into the land and they finally came face to face with simple obedience, they shunned it. They rejected it. They didn't like it. And they said, we don't want that. How can you what do you mean? That seems to be so valueless. When really that's the ultimate, highest connection to God. Let's read it inside. The Meraglim, they were b'pchinas hasaga. They were in a state, their entire existence was, they had great understanding. V'gilui hatainug. They had pleasure that was fully revealed in them. As we said earlier, they were pampered and spoiled with and indulged in the pleasure of the divine. And we see that they experienced pleasure, godly pleasure, and complete and full and grasping and understanding. They came from a world of knowledge and understanding. This is why it says by them, ish echad lamata, one man for each tribe. The fact that it says each, it refers to it lists all of the 10 spies, and it says, take one man from each tribe. By indicating one man from each tribe, that is indicative that each of them was coming from their own experiences. That means that the spy that was coming from the tribe of Reuven was a complete different type of a persona than the person coming from the tribe of Shimon. Why? Because when it comes to experience and understanding, everybody understands differently. Like the sages say, just like our faces, no two faces are alike, no two minds are alike, no two psychological experiences are alike. Because they experienced, because they were so much into the world of integration, assimilation, they came from the world of Torah. If there was ever a yeshiva, it was the 40 years in the desert, it was the ultimate yeshiva. So they were as yeshivish, as you might say, as you can possibly be. Saturated with experience. And that's why each one was different. Each one had his own view, own experience. P'chinas chalkos, in a state of division. The ba'asaga, because in understanding, that's where all the differences take place. Ubederech klal, he says in the parentheses, hu shep'chinas hagilui, when something reveals itself, when you have 10 people who are told to do a mitzvah just because God said so, then that mitzvah is pretty much the same by all of them. They're all when it comes to simple servants who are fulfilling the deed of the will of the master without any feeling, they're uniform. It's all exactly the same. But when it comes to delights and understanding, that means revelation. And every revelation has to come in its own manner, its own nuance, its own experience. There's no 2 cups of wine that are exactly the same, because that's experience. It's different. And this is what it means. Vayasuru es haaretz. They should tour the land. Piddish. Vayasuru means they should go into the land and experience the advantage of the land. What's that? Hulashon Yisroel. It means from the word of profit and advantage and great. To bring now something added to chachma, to wisdom. The intention is that they should bring through their experiences Now they should come and wake up the earth, and to wake up the feminine element of the land, that is in the power, that has its own power, which comes from the level of, remember we learned that from the lights while they're in the source, that's when you get, that's the midbar, that's the wilderness that leads you to simple obedience. But again, we need a little bit of experience, but their experience needed to be a very, very humble experience. An experience that on the one hand is an experience of delight and pleasure, but on the other hand, that is dominated by humility. Where, notwithstanding the fact that I'm experiencing all this delight and pleasure, I know what's most important is not me, but God's will. Now, Moshe was the perfect example of that. There was no one like Moshe who understood Torah like Moshe, but at the same time, there was no one as humble like Moshe who appreciated the act of a mitzvah and the simple Jew doing a mitzvah in the most simplest manner. What Moshe kvelled in, what Moshe experienced, what Moshe understood and appreciated because of his extreme humility. So Moshe wanted to share that with the Meraglim, that they should go as Moshe's agents, that they should bring the experience of Moshe into their world of delight and pleasure, and then they should bring into the land of Canaan both experience but humble experience, so that they can juice the land, so that the land canal, it can lead to a simple observance. Moshe Rabbeinu himself was in the level of ma. Ma means humility. Moshe said about himself, Anachnu mo, we are what? So Moshe was the epitome of self-effacement, of not self. He didn't desire b'shum tainuk. He didn't have any desire of any pleasure. Only simple obedience. He wanted to bring them too into that state. That even though they were great lamdanim, they were great, knowledgeable, and great, and had all this, he wanted to make them chasidim. That's what he wanted to make them. You should see the land. That means bring your experience into the land, but appreciate the land. And remember we learned in the beginning the questions that he asked. Why did he? And it's interesting. That's what you'll see. He says, by each thing, you should see the land. Mahu, what is it? And you should look at the people. Mahu, what is it? And do so and see. That means you should infuse every single part of the land, of the topography of the land, with what? With with humility. In other words, look at it from a very humble place. Look at the simplistic service that's going to happen in the land of Israel. Bring your entire experience into that moment, and with the deepest humility say that all my experiences doesn't come close to the simple mitzvah that we will do in the land of Israel. By that, you will juice the land. In other words, if you're just going, let me put it this way, if you would go into Eastern Europe and look for the simple Jews, that the Jews should do mitzvahs with simplicity, the Jews were dead. They were not inspired. They just were not, there was nothing there. Then you needed the Baal Shem Tov, who came in and said, wow, doing a mitzvah with simplicity is the most awesome thing. Once the Baal Shem Tov said that, and the Baal Shem Tov is a man of Torah, a man of light, a man of experience, said that, the simple people wake up and start producing their produce, which they can produce. So this is what Moshe is telling them. Go into the land, dafka, precisely you guys, who are on the highest level of experience. You have to go into the land and be awed by the simplicity of the land. And by that you will awaken the land to produce what it can produce. And he sends them to all. Remember, we said that in Torah there's three places. There is the civilization, there is the farmland, and there is the wilderness. So corresponding to that, he mentions three different places to go in the land. V'chashiv eretz, land, arim, cities, va'am, and then he says, look at the people. Sheheim, which they correspond to these three levels. Aretz, land, corresponds to midbar, to the wilderness. Yishuv, and then arim, cities, that corresponds to civilization, to Yishuv. And nation and people represent Sada, the field, because when you say people, it usually means more simple people, not people that live, farm people. They're not the people who like the more sophisticated people. The more sophisticated people live in the cities. College-educated people, not them, simple people. So they're the ones who live in the farms. So Eretz Midbar, Eretz is Midbar. Va'arim, and the cities is Makom Yishuv, a place of Yishuv B'nai Adam, the place mainly civilization. Va'am, and the what we call Am, the simple people, Hamadrega Pchusa, it's a lower level. Shasago Mahat, there is some understanding, not like the cities that are full understanding. Ubakulam Oimar, and by all of them he says, Ma. He says, Le'isam si ma. Sha'akavana, the intention is she'yir b'pchenas bittul the midbar, that you should bring in the bittul into everything. That means that even when you're learning the parts of Torah, basically what Moshe is trying to teach them is that every part of Torah needs to have a little flavor of the deepest secrets of Torah. That even when you're learning the part of Torah that you fully grasp and fully understand, it's really, don't get lost in that. Always have a memory of when you learned the secrets of the secrets, and then you sensed the utter incomprehensibility of it. You should bring that into your every part of Torah. And when we have that, then we never become arrogant, and then we can always appreciate that the mitzvah, the act of a mitzvah, supersedes the Torah entirely. But the meraglim they didn't want this submission. They didn't want this nullification. They didn't like this nullification. They liked experience. They were too deeply embedded in experience that they could not relinquish that. And that's why they spoke bad about the land. But Moshe's intention was that they should carry the bittul in. The shiluch hamaraglim, and the sending of the spies, who b'pchenas amshachas mad, is really delivering the water, delivering the masculine waters, lias Allah's man, to awaken the earth, the awaken of the feminine waters, the aretz mitzad atzmai of the land on its own. V'zeu vayasuru, to bring the advantage, lias pezeh Yisroel chulu, to bring an extra advantage chulu, like we said. With this, he concludes the Mimer, the discourse. Chapter 20 is finished, and the entire discourse. All we have over here is a kitzur. I want to do it today so that we don't get left over with this. And next class we can start discourse number 6. Mazel tov. V'hine b'Torah, let's do a fast kitzur, a fast summary. B'Torah yesh midbar yishuv sada. There are these 3 levels of midbar, wilderness, yishuv, settlement, and sada and field. The Yashloima, we can say midbar pnimius Torah. Midbar is the innermost of the Torah, bisharsha, in its root. Mepchenas chachma, the esesviris agnuzos, that's coming from such a lofty level of chachma, where it is the chachma of the 10 hidden spheres. V'inyan tainug atzmi, it's a pleasure, but it's a very essential pleasure, abilti murgash, that you can't feel. Ayin lekamam, we'll look later, Perek Reish Gimel, Be'inyan HaChachma, where he discusses this. V'yishuv, and then there's, on the other hand, on the other extreme, there is civilization, Torah Shabbat, the Torah that's in full grasp. The Sada, and there is the field, is in the middle, Kavanas HaMitzvahs, where you have a little understanding, but you still can feel that it's above your head. V'shayrish Maisa HaMitzvahs, and the root of the act of a mitzvah supersedes all these levels. But Kabbalah's Oil Malchus Shemayim, when you accept the yoke of heaven and you do the mitzvah just because God says so, hu b'pchinas midbar, it's connected to midbar because the midbar part of Torah generates that. V'zeu inyan eretz Canaan, and that's the land of Canaan. Rak tchila, however, in the beginning, tzarech liyasam shachas mad. You need to bring in the male waters, b'chinas gilui, and a revealed. You have to bring in some revelation. V'inyan Talmud mevil edemaisa. It's the concept that Torah study leads to action, but you have to make sure that the Torah study has to be with the right flavor. And this is the idea of sending the spies, the inyan of Ayasuru, Lashon Yisroel, and the idea of Ayasuru, which means to bring extra advantage, chulu, to enable the advantage of the act of a mitzvah, as we will see. We will be Be'ezer Hashem start next class, and now Mazel Tov on our Siyum, finished 5 Maimarim, and that's a huge accomplishment. Meanwhile, let that be a merit for Mashiach to be here today.